I hadn't planned to come home early, but something felt off. The plane landed ahead of schedule, and I didn't even bother to call. I told myself it was to surprise them, but deep down, I think I was bracing for something I couldn't name. As I drove past the familiar winding roads of my old neighborhood, the early fall air carried that crisp bite. Leaves had begun to curl at the edges, yellow and brittle. The driveway stretched out like a memory I didn't want to relive, long, narrow, and too quiet. I parked just far enough back to keep the car out of view from the front window. This house used to be my refuge, but now it felt more like a test I didn't study for. I stood at the door a moment, clutching the key that never left my keychain. Even when I swore I'd never use it again, I debated knocking. Maybe they were napping. Maybe I didn't want to see their faces through the peephole. I slid the key into the lock. The house greeted me with silence. Not warm silence. Hollow. Each step creaked louder than I remembered, echoing like the house was asking why I'd come back. The living room looked wrong. Not messy, but different. The couch was facing the wrong wall. Mom always said it had to face the window for good light. Now it faced the TV. Her rules, broken. And my photo, the one of me in high school, all braces and nerves, was missing from the mantel. In its place, a ceramic angel I'd never seen before. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the kitchen counter. Mustard crusted on the edge. The scent of Dad's cologne hung in the air, sharper than I remembered, like someone had just walked through it. Then I heard it. A bark. But not Rusty. Rusty died 3 years ago. This bark was shrill, unfamiliar. A smaller dog, one I'd never met. Then, voices. Upstairs. I froze. Not Mom and Dad's voices. Younger. Lighter. A laugh. Feminine. Flirtatious. I moved toward the staircase. One slow step at a time, heel first, to keep the stairs from squealing. My heart beat like it was trying to outrun my thoughts. Then he appeared. Marcus. Shirtless. Hair damp. A towel slung over his shoulder like he lived here. My sister's ex-husband. He stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes met mine and widened. "You weren't supposed to be back until next week," he blurted out. I didn't answer. My jaw clenched, but my voice stayed even. "Where's my mother?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he'd swallowed the wrong lie. They had a restraining order on him. Years ago. After what he did to Lisa, I never thought I'd see his face again, let alone here. My fingers curled into fists, not out of fear, out of the raw, acidic betrayal bubbling up in my chest. "It's not what you think," he stammered. "It never is," I said, walking right past him. I didn't give him another glance. I didn't ask what he was doing here. I didn't care what his excuse was. I wanted the truth, and not from him. The hallway smelled like cinnamon potpourri, but the scent couldn't cover the staleness. I opened the door to my old room. Storage, boxes stacked to the ceiling. My bed replaced with a metal shelf. My posters gone. My name tag on the door now read guest. Guest, in my own house. I stood there, staring at that sign like it might start making sense. It didn't. This wasn't just a surprise visit. This was walking into a story they'd already written without me. I leaned against the doorframe, breath shallow. My mind went back, years ago. Lisa crying in the bathroom, whispering for me to call 911. I did. I was 17. The cops came, and everyone said I did the right thing. But no one really stood by me afterward. They said it ruined the family. I started pulling away after that. The silence stretched too long. Birthdays missed. Calls unanswered. This retreat I'd been on, some dusty little monastery in New Mexico, was supposed to help me forgive. But maybe they didn't want forgiveness. Maybe they just wanted me gone. "They never wanted me to come back," I whispered. They just didn't say it out loud. I smiled, polite, measured, the kind of smile you wear when you're done asking for a seat at the table. I wasn't leaving, not until I figured out what else they were hiding. Out back, the sun was setting behind the trees. I walked through the house, ignoring the footsteps behind me, and pushed open the back door. There she was. My mother, on her knees in the garden, trimming dead blooms like she hadn't just let a ghost move back into our house. She looked up, wiped her hands on her jeans. "Well," she said with a calm that made my blood cold, "I guess the vacation's over." She wasn't surprised. She knew. She didn't even look up right away. There she was, kneeling in the soil like nothing had happened, hands buried in a flower bed, plucking weeds as if I hadn't just walked back into the middle of a lie. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows across the yard. She finally lifted her head and smiled, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Well," she said, like we were catching up at the grocery store, "I guess the vacation's over." That was it. No hug. No shock. No, "What are you doing here?" Just a bland remark, like she'd known the whole time I was coming. I waited for some crack in her face, something that said, "I missed you." Nothing came. Just that cool composure she'd perfected over decades. "You knew I was coming back early," I said. "I had a feeling," she replied, standing up slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. "This time of year always pulls you home." Not exactly. She didn't offer to sit, didn't ask about my flight, didn't even make eye contact. I forced a smile, more muscle than feeling. "Nice weather," I muttered. She nodded. "Unseasonably warm." The silence between us had weight to it. Years of unfinished conversations, of birthdays skipped, of phone calls not returned. I felt like a guest in a hotel lobby, not a daughter in her mother's backyard. I tucked my hands into my jacket pockets. "So, the house looks different." She reached for a small watering can. "Things change when you're gone too long." I studied her face. Not tired, not aged, just thinner, like she'd been hollowing herself out one day at a time. "And Marcus?" I asked, voice even. "When did he become a fixture again?" She kept her gaze on the roses. "He's helping out, temporarily." I blinked. "Helping who?" She didn't answer. I stepped closer. "Or helping cover for who?" She still wouldn't meet my eyes. That same stoic mask. The one she wore at Dad's funeral. The one she wore when Lisa left for rehab. The one she wore when I asked why my name never came up in church prayers like Lisa's always did. "You've been distant," she finally said. "For years. It didn't feel like you were family anymore." That hit harder than I expected. A breath caught in my chest. Distant. I was the only one who visited when Dad had his stroke. I sat by his bedside for 3 nights while everyone else argued over insurance. I brought her groceries when she had shingles and couldn't drive. And still, I was the one pushed to the edge of the photo. I stared at her. "So, you replaced me with him? With him?" Her jaw tightened. That was the closest thing to emotion she showed. A door creaked behind us. Marcus stepped onto the patio, a beer in one hand, smirk painted across his face like it never left. He'd clearly been listening. Probably the whole time. "Still holding grudges, huh?" he said, voice light. I turned toward him, slow and steady. "Still trespassing, huh?" He laughed. "Good to see you too." My mother shot me a look, the kind that said, "Don't make a scene." I didn't flinch. "You've got nerve walking around here like this is yours." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "You left, remember? People step up when others walk out." "Step up?" I barked a dry laugh. "You mean move in and pretend?" He took a sip of his beer, unbothered. "Some of us don't need permission to belong." I looked at my mother. She said nothing, just looked back at her garden like the flowers might save her from this mess. "You let him back in," I said, quiet but sharp. "After everything." Her voice was almost a whisper. "He's changed." I shook my head slowly. "No, you just changed who you're willing to forgive." Behind us, a neighbor called over the fence. "Hey, Marcus! You still helping fix the garage this weekend?" Marcus smiled and waved. "Yeah, Saturday morning." I froze. Helping fix the garage? That man had been part of this household. My mother hadn't just let him back in. She'd introduced him back to the world as if nothing ever happened, like he was the returning son, like I was the outsider. Something inside me hardened. A switch flipped. They had rewritten everything, and if I didn't stop it, they'd erase me completely. When people rewrite history, I said, not caring if either of them heard, you either correct it or they publish it. I took a step back. I'll be staying, and not as a guest. Neither of them responded. I turned and walked inside. The sun had nearly vanished. Dusk stretched long and blue over the house as I made my way up the stairs. Later that night, lying on the unfamiliar bed with stiff sheets and a hollow pillow, I stared at the ceiling. The vent above me whined faintly. Then, voices. I rolled over and leaned in. She wasn't supposed to come back. Not yet, Marcus whispered. My eyes shot open. This wasn't just awkward. This was planned. They were hiding something. And I was about to find out what. Sleep never came. I lay in the darkness of my childhood room, twisting between what I knew and what I feared. Marcus's words haunted me. She wasn't supposed to come back. The sentence played over and over. The room felt sterile and staged, like a museum installation of my former life. Trophies I once won sat dust-blanketed, photos hung with perfect symmetry, posters unchanged. Nothing new, nothing that said I'd ever mattered. The silence weighed in layers. I wondered how long my mother had looked at Marcus the way she once looked at me. Dread settled in my chest, and the need to know, to tear apart the lies, became louder than exhaustion. Voices through the vent made me startle. I held my breath, listened. A soft chuckle. Marcus's laugh. My mother's voice tight. She saw the couch. You should have gotten rid of it after what happened. Panic laced her tone. Marcus replied smoothly, she doesn't know the whole story. My fingers fumbled for my phone, opened the recorder app. I pressed it against the vent, knees on the floor, heart pounding. The language implied things I couldn't yet name. The words were loaded. I felt the weight shift from doubt to suspicion. This wasn't just favoritism. It was a cover-up. Night deepened. I crept from room to room, retracing steps I'd made in daylight. I headed to the garage, past walls that seemed to listen. The lock on a drawer caught my eye. One I'd tried to pry open as a teenager. I used the same trick. A bent paperclip. The drawer yielded. Inside lay papers I never expected. Bank statements, legal documents, letters addressed to me but never delivered. One letter was in Dad's handwriting. It stated he intended to leave part of the house to me. My mind whipped. I dug further, found a recent application for a title change in Marcus's name. Fraud. A knot in my throat. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. Memory crashed in. I'm 10. Marcus smashes my snow globe. Glass shards everywhere. My father hugs me and says, "You deserve better." They blamed me for that night. Now I saw it differently. It was a warning. I stood clutching the letters, knees weak but jaw firm. They've been rewriting everything, I said under my breath. I made drafts. Email with all attachments. To myself, just in case. I texted a friend. I'm staying longer. Things got weird. I rehearsed what I'd say. Every version felt too raw, too brittle. I needed more than emotion. I needed proof. So I decided to watch, listen, wait for another crack to smash open. The lies wouldn't spill. I'd force them. Then I heard it. A knock. Soft, deliberate. My pulse shot. Can we talk? Marcus's voice, low, steady. I buried the documents beneath the bed. My hands trembled. I forced myself forward. I opened the door. Something in the air snapped. The house had gone still again, not the quiet kind, but the kind that hums with secrets. I sat in the study, the light from a single desk lamp making everything around me feel farther away. I'd spread the letters and journals across the old mahogany desk. Every word from my father's pen held more weight now. I could hear his voice in my mind. Slow, steady. Protect what's yours. Something caught my eye. The drawer I'd found earlier, the one that had been locked, it was cracked open now. Only slightly, but enough to know someone had been there. I didn't leave it like that. My breath held itself without asking. I closed the door behind me softly, reached down and slid the drawer open. Inside, not just loose papers, there was a folder, thick, financial documents, signed checks, house deeds, and then a single note in Marcus's handwriting. Once she returns, make sure there's no proof she ever lived here. My skin burned cold. There was also a torn blueprint, faded and folded, the same layout of the house, but with a strange addition, an extra wall, an old hallway. Vesperine's name was the only signature on it, my mother. I took photos of everything, fast, quiet, efficient, heart racing, fingers shaking but purposeful. They've been rewriting history, I whispered, and this time they were going to delete me for good. Downstairs, I found Marcus where I expected him, sprawled on the couch, drink in hand. I walked in slow, set my phone on the coffee table, face up. He looked at it, then at me, didn't even blink. "You snoop too much," he said, sipping like we were old friends. I didn't flinch. "You erase too much." He smiled like he owned the air between us. "All families have secrets. Not all families try to rewrite who counts as family." I didn't wait for him to reply. I walked away while his silence crackled behind me. The media console sat untouched. I knew the family slideshow was scheduled for tomorrow, some curated nostalgia to impress guests. I plugged in the USB. It auto-cued images of birthdays, graduations, holidays, none of mine. My voice, gone. I scrolled through the file names. One stood out. Tear Speech Final Version. Deleted from the playlist. Of course, I copied everything, fast, before they could notice. I stared at the empty screen. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me forgotten. But I wasn't going to make it that easy. Back in my room, or what was now a storage closet with a bed, I sat on the edge of the mattress, holding my phone like a lifeline. I stared at the ceiling. What if they find it all? Doubt crept in, fast and familiar. But my father's voice again. Protect what's yours. I made the decision in silence. Tomorrow, I'd start the calls. A lawyer. Maybe even the press. And I'd message Eliza, the only person from my past who'd actually show up without a question. I started typing. I found something. I'll tell you in person. Send. A second later, the front door creaked. I froze. Heavy footsteps. Not hurried. Deliberate. My room sat near the top of the stairs. Whoever it was, they were coming up. I pressed myself against the wall, heart in my throat, every sense sharp. The footsteps crept closer. I pressed against the wall, muscles locked, breath shallow. But it wasn't Marcus. It was her. My mother stood there holding a glass of water like it was a shield. Her face was pale, not tired, but unsettled. She looked at me the way people look at something they forgot they owned. "I thought I heard something," she said softly, voice clipped at the end. "Couldn't sleep," I answered. "Too many memories." We stood in silence a second too long. Her eyes scanned the hallway behind me. Then, just as quietly, she turned and walked back down the stairs. But she glanced over her shoulder once. Quick, sharp. She knew something. Back in the kitchen by 5 a.m., I made coffee just to hold something warm. I watched the sunrise through the window blinds and wondered, would it be easier to walk away? Pretend none of this mattered? Then my father's voice again. "Cowards run before the truth rises." I opened a drawer near the fridge, looking for a spoon. Found something else instead. A photo album, new leather, labeled New Memories. I flipped it open and my breath caught. Marcus, my mother, barbecues, birthdays, a Christmas photo by the fireplace, the same fireplace that used to have my stocking on it. Gone now. Page after page, I wasn't there. Not one single photo. Even the room I slept in, the one I grew up in, was shown as storage in one of the shots. It was like I had never existed. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I closed the book, calmly, and placed it on the table, not to hide it, to display it. When Marcus came into the kitchen 30 minutes later, he looked relaxed, confident. He poured himself a glass of juice like we were still kids in summer break. I didn't let him say a word. You planned this, I said, tapping the album. All of it. A full takeover. He tilted his head, amused. You always were dramatic. I pulled out my phone, laid it next to the album. Tapped the screen. Photos, audio clips, documents, the title deed, the blueprint, his note. He stared at them all. Didn't deny a single thing. You weren't around, he finally said. You checked out. People who vanish don't get to keep things. I looked straight into him. Quiet people aren't blind. We remember everything. He didn't smirk this time. Footsteps again, this time heavier, faster. Our mother entered, lips pressed tight. What is going on here? I kept my voice even. You want truth? Here it is. I've got proof of fraud, of manipulation, of lies. And if you let this go on, you're choosing him and everything he's done. She looked at Marcus, then back at me. Her jaw clenched. If you want to tear this family apart over paperwork, she said, that's your choice. I shook my head. You tore it apart the day you decided fairness was optional. She didn't argue. She just turned and walked out. That silence hit harder than any scream. Back in my room, I closed the door and locked it. I uploaded the files to cloud storage, made 3 backups, and emailed copies to myself under 3 different subject lines. Then I hit record on my phone and spoke into the lens. I'm recording this because I don't trust anyone in this house. If something happens to me or these files disappear, this is my truth. I kept it short, direct. Then I wrote out everything, lawyer's number, file names, passwords, folded it into an envelope and taped it to the back of the dresser. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about surviving the story they wanted to erase me from. As I zipped my bag up to head out, finally meet with the lawyer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. You should stop digging, for your own good. I stared at it. No name, no emoji, just a threat. I didn't reply. But from that second on, I started recording everything. The morning light felt foreign. I woke to my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I stared at it like it might bite me. The warning message from last night still pulsed in my mind. You should stop digging. My fingers hovered. I didn't respond. I screened calls, locked my door, backed up every document twice, triple-checked the cloud. The house was quiet, colder. My mother's footsteps didn't brush the floor like usual. Marcus walked past the kitchen with a smug look, like he already claimed every secret this home held. I sat in the kitchen long enough to feel the weight of absence. The silence felt sharper now than any argument I'd ever endured. Memory pulled me backward. I'm 6, forged snow on my coat, Dad's car idling nearby. He held my hand. I cried because they'd yelled at me for no reason. He told me, people who can't face truth always attack the one who speaks it. I lean out of that memory, stomach tight. Now, in the locked lower cabinet in the study, I found it. Dad's old voice memo recorder. I kept my breath low, exploring its dusty surface. Inside, an unreleased file. His voice, rough and urgent, saying he planned to update the will, how Marcus's ambition was dangerous, dated just weeks before his stroke. The kind of thing I should have known. Why didn't I hear it? Tears blurred my vision for a moment. I loaded the recording and tracked my mother into the study. Listen, I said, pressing play. She flinched, the words unspooled. She closed her eyes. When it ended, silence screamed. You're digging things that should stay buried, she said, stiff voice. Things that should stay buried? I asked, voice low. You loved him. You stood by him. She shook her head. I'm tired. Tired of choosing sides. Tired of pretending we're not broken. She turned and walked away. I doubled over in my room. I allowed myself to cry. I let the ache come. The betrayal, the grief, the memory of a father so proud and so silent. The cold walls of that house felt like they were closing in. I reached for my phone. The message thread, the unknown number, ready to delete it. I hesitated. Every time I tried to give up, Dad's voice echoed. You are worth protecting. I drafted a plan. Not a reckless storm, a hammer pounding slowly. I'd dismantle each lie, one piece at a time. I positioned backups, legal documents, audio files. Then I bought a lock and installed it on my bedroom door so no one wandered in while I slept. I contacted a probate attorney in secret, set a meeting. I copied the recording and the deed to secure storage, places they couldn't reach. I typed out a letter to Marcus, unsent, from a place he can't silence. It ended. You mistook my grief for weakness. You were wrong. In that moment, I realized something. The house might still bear their names, but the truth would always belong to me. Later that night, my keyring felt colder. One key was missing. I searched drawers. A file I'd placed under the bed was gone. My pulse hammered. My breath caught. I whispered in the dark. You didn't just cross the line, Marcus. You erased it. The war had begun. Rain tapped the windows like a warning. I sat in the living room, evidence spread across the coffee table, fingers tracing signature lines I'd memorized. The clock ticked past the hour, and the hum of the air conditioner felt like it wanted to drown out truth. I breathed in slow. This was my moment. My father's voice echoed, "You deserve to be heard." That echo pulsed behind my ribs. I rose from the couch, shoulders straight, and walked toward the study door, knowing I'd drawn a line tonight I would never cross back. I sent a group message. Family meeting, now. Within minutes, my mother, Marcus, and Vesperine gathered. They stood stiff, faces taut with curiosity and suspicion. I placed documents, the unsigned will, the recording, the blueprint, the deed, in the center of the table. I looked them in the eyes. I kept quiet for years. Silence means nothing when truth is obvious. Thunder rumbled overhead. The lights flickered. A pause that felt like a heartbeat. Their gazes darted, defenseless. I turned to my mother. You told me I shouldn't fight the family. Now I fight for myself. I hit play on the recording. Dad's voice speaking of his intentions, Marcus's ambition. Her face went pale. Then I revealed what I'd known. You told me I never existed, but Dad made me trustee. In secret. She gasped, stumbled back. Marcus attempted an interruption. I held up a hand. I'm not asking for permission. I'm reclaiming legacy. The room held its breath. From my stack of documents, I pulled the forged deed. You filed this, switching my share. I read aloud, clause after clause. Property rights redistribute if heir is absent more than 2 years. He'd authored it himself. Shock registered. Vesperine clawed at the pages, mother's face drained. I stood high in my resolve. You built this by erasing me. Watch me dismantle it with truth. Gasps, denials, anger erupted, but I remained calm amid chaos. I ignored the shouts. I addressed them all. You rewrote history. I'm restoring it. Marcus lunged toward the table. Instinctively, I held up the recording device. Vesperine cried, reaching for Mother. Mother froze. I stepped back, letting them face their own guilt. Then I walked toward the front door. I give you one chance. Tell the truth. Power mingled with heartbreak. I confronted family, not strangers. Outside, rain poured. I reached the threshold and paused. A car horn in the distance. Papers fluttered around us. I whispered, if they wanted war, they should have never taught me how to fight. The first footsteps on the driveway sounded like either victory or collapse. I held my ground. The storm didn't wait for an invitation. Rain slammed down in sheets as I stood at the doorstep, letting the wind soak through the hem of my coat. It didn't matter. Something about the downpour felt earned. I checked my phone one last time. Recordings, secured. Photos, backed up. Messages, ready. One deep breath. Behind me, footsteps shuffled in the foyer. Vesperine first, her arms crossed. Marcus close behind, jaw set like stone. Mother appeared last, slower, like gravity had gained weight. Then Thaddeus, uncle, reluctant witness, closed the circle. I stepped in, voice low but full. This ends tonight. Silence stretched across the room like a held breath. No one moved as I reached into my coat and pulled out the sealed envelope. I turned to Thaddeus. You held this for a reason. Now give it back. He hesitated, then, without a word, handed it over. My fingers peeled the seal like peeling years off a wound. I unfolded the will, my father's original, untouched by Marcus's edits. He named me, I said. By name, by trust, by right. I read the line. I trust my child who left and returned. Vesperine's hand shot to her mouth. Marcus's lips parted, but no sound came. Mom. Her hands trembled as she covered her face. That line cut her open. Vindication doesn't come loud. Sometimes it whispers like justice. I wasn't done. I pressed play on the voice memo. Dad's voice, shaky but strong. Tear, he said. Don't let them bury your voice. The final seconds I hadn't heard until now. His whisper, faint, like wind through old leaves. You'll know when it's time. My hand shook, but my spine didn't. You thought death would erase me, I said, but his voice gave me life. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing meaningful came out. Vesperine clung to her disbelief. The room buzzed with a tension no one knew how to cut. You weren't there when he needed you, Vesperine snapped, voice shrill, sharp like glass. I didn't flinch. I stayed away to survive, not to become a shadow of myself in a house that never saw me. Marcus took a step forward, fists balled. I met him halfway. Try it, I said. I've got the law, the truth, and Dad's words on my side. What have you got? A pen with stolen ink? Thaddeus moved beside me quietly. No words, just presence. Vesperine looked to Mom. Do something, she cried. But Mom? She didn't. Her tears had turned cold. I looked at Marcus and Vesperine. Give me the forged papers. Marcus tossed them at the floor. It was symbolic. Didn't matter. I already had them scanned. Vesperine still tried to claw at the idea of family. We're supposed to protect each other, she whimpered. You protect lies, I replied, then turned to Mom. He was your husband. I was your child. You picked silence. I'm giving you a chance to choose again. And for once, she didn't argue. She didn't defend. She simply stepped aside. The truth stood between us all like a line of fire. I turned and walked out into the storm. I didn't bother with the umbrella. Let the rain fall. Let it wash off what this house tried to bury. I reached the end of the driveway, the streetlights blurring through raindrops. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I checked it. Local woman named primary heir in contentious estate case. I exhaled. Not relief, not celebration, something deeper, something earned. I looked back once. The house was still. Quiet, broken and heavy with truths no longer hidden. This isn't the end. It's her beginning. The light came in, soft. It wasn't harsh like the kitchen bulbs back at that old house, or dim like the shaded hallways I used to hide in. It poured through the tall windows of my apartment, quiet, warm, unbothered. I laid there a moment longer, under the thin cotton sheet, letting my chest rise and fall with no urgency. The storm was over. Literally. Figuratively. Whatever you want to call it. The silence wasn't haunting anymore. It was a different kind of stillness, one that didn't make me look over my shoulder. My muscles felt different too, like I'd shed something heavy that had clung to my bones for years. I sat up, stretched, no bruises, no screams from the hallway. Just mourning. I pulled out my journal and began writing down everything from last night. Not for revenge, for memory, for clarity. The last line I wrote before closing it. The past no longer defines me. I define it. Later that morning, I heard a knock. Small envelope slid under my door. No return address. I opened it with that weird feeling in my stomach, half dread, half curiosity. The handwriting hit me like a wave. My father's, real, familiar. The date in the corner, 1 week before he died. I sat down before I could fall. The letter smelled like old books, like his study. Dear, it started. I don't know if this'll reach you before I go. If it does, know this, I was wrong. I read slowly. He admitted things I thought he'd carry to the grave, that he was scared of losing control, that he mistook my independence for rejection, that his pride kept him from seeing me fully. You were always the strongest, he wrote. I just didn't know how to love you for it. I didn't cry like before. These tears were different. They didn't hurt. They freed something in me. I folded the letter back into its envelope, not to hide it, just to keep it safe. That afternoon, I took a bus down to the old community center. I hadn't been back since my return. Same building, chipped paint, that smell of coffee and dry erase markers. I stepped inside, waved to a few familiar faces, asked if they needed help. They always did. I started mentoring again. A small group of girls, different ages, different scars. I didn't talk about lawsuits or wills. I talked about finding your voice, standing when it's easier to sit, saying no when the world expects yes. I didn't need to go viral, didn't need a headline. Justice isn't a show. It's a steady rebuild. Later that week, my phone rang. The name on the screen stung a little. Mom. First call since the night everything unraveled. I answered. We didn't say much, not at first. Then her voice, unsure, low. You were brave. I wasn't. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't demand more. I wasn't keeping score anymore. I told her I forgave her, not to erase what happened, but to stop carrying it like it was mine alone. She sighed. We sat in the silence. This one didn't feel heavy. Felt human. Before we hung up, she said, maybe one day you'll let me know you're okay. I said, I just did. I updated the estate, kept what mattered, donated the rest, started sketching out a memoir, not to burn bridges, just to show the map I took getting here. I didn't need people to see how I won. I wanted them to see how I rebuilt. I booked a trip, not to run, but to see. I packed light, one suitcase, left the weight behind. The ghosts, the guilt, the need for approval. None of that fit in my carry-on. Before leaving, I stood in front of my mirror. Different reflection now, not softer, stronger. I said to it, I came home early to learn I was always enough. And I meant it. So, to you watching, maybe your story looks nothing like mine. Maybe your family never hurt you. Maybe they did. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Coming home early means facing the truth sooner. And sometimes, that's the greatest gift of all. Thanks for walking this with me. For sitting through the quiet, for listening to the parts that were hard to say out loud. I hope, wherever you are, you find your voice inside whatever storm you've lived through. And hey, see you in the next story. Because every ending is really just a door creaking open.